Okay, there we go. 1 o'clock. Thank you all for coming. Welcome to the June edition of the Facilities Committee meeting. We have it's a short agenda today, but I think there are two items that we want to talk about with an eye toward getting them on the agenda for Tuesday's workshop meeting. I had indicated that at the last workshop meeting that the cell tower project and the addendum to the AEM contract would be tabled, and now we're starting the process of untabling them to get them on the agenda. So if it's okay with you, Joe Way, we'll start with the cell tower project. I sent around the proposal. Did everybody get it? I'll make sure, first of all. Looks like everybody did. Did anybody not get it? Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I got it too.
By the way, Joe, do we have any questions at this point that might have come in from?
No, we do not.
Oh, okay, great, thanks. Back to the cell tower project. I had some questions, but I'll reserve the right to ask them after the rest of the discussion. I wonder, just to start, Joe Way, if you could maybe just summarize. We don't need to do a line-by-line reading of the proposal, but just summarize what the contractor plans to do for us.
Sure. So basically what we have a proposal for is a passive cell phone booster. Basically, it's going to put an antenna array on the roof of a Watton Creek connected to a distribution amp, which will then feed 60 indoor antennas. There'll be antennas in almost every area of the building, so that the exterior signal will be amplified throughout the building. I said passive because, you know, what our antenna array on the roof will do is we'll just point to one of the nearby towers. And if you look at the towers that they have scoped and that they're planning to connect to, we should get pretty good amounts of signal from the from those arrays. We recently played around. Wilson Wireless is the company that is doing this, and we recently deployed a similar, although single antenna solution in our administration building. In our information technology suite, you know, although it's modern and round like the bridge of the Starship Enterprise, it gets no penetration from the antenna outside. So what we did was we ran a wire up to the roof and put a Wilson passive amplifier in there, and we're getting a fantastic amount of signal. All of our phones are working in our office area, which has been really nice. So the technology works. The other solution is a much more solution, and when you're talking about active, and that involves, you know, each carrier has to provide licensing, and they can choose or not choose to be involved. Now, the passiveness of this means that we're not, you know, interfering with any outside signal. We're not, you know, we're not building a cell phone tower and piggybacking other signals. We're just going to be absorbing the signal from the nearby antennas and distributing it internally. So it's a pretty simple solution. Again, installing the 60 antennas, they're very small. You know, if you've been in municipal buildings, sometimes you may not even realize what you're looking at, but they look like maybe a little Dixie cup attached to the the drop ceiling. So they're pretty non-invasive looking, and should do a nice job for us.
Great, thanks. Christy, just curious, since you were the one who brought this to our attention, based on your and my recollection of your stating of the problem, which was that there are quite a few areas inside the building where you couldn't receive or make cell phone calls. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
One of the options that was used was the Wi-Fi calling, but that's not always, doesn't always work. And I've even had instances on my district cell phone where the Wi-Fi calling doesn't work in certain areas, including the main hallway right outside the office. And on my personal cell phone, I can't even get on the Wi-Fi calling. So I know other employees have had that issue as well and parents.
Right, okay. So for both of you, Joe and Christy, is it safe to say that this is in effect a safety concern?
Yeah, I mean, and just for historical sake, I do want to let you know this is the third time that we have brought forward a proposal for information about this, because it has been an ongoing concern since the day the building was built. I had a conversation with the engineers, and they felt like it wasn't really an issue. Now that was what, 11 years ago, so you know, times have changed a little bit, but I think initially, you know, being LEED certified, you know, we spend a lot of time thinking about, well, how can we make sure that we're getting these, we're clicking off, we're checking all the boxes and making sure that we're LEED certified, and we have low E glass, and we have all these other things. You know, this is a relatively high level of, I would say, for an engineer. You know, if a hospital were to be built that was LEED certified and didn't have, you know, internal cellular, there would be problems. So I think it was an oversight initially, and I do think it's very important that we move ahead with a solution. Now, you know, we've had a couple of different variations. You know, the first quote we had was not a passive solution, and it was something in the area of $70,000 a carrier. And we had another one in the middle, which I can't even remember because it was a joke. So this company, I have much more experience with Wilson and Kit, who is a trusted partner that we've been using, I'm going to say, for at least 15 years. So I think in all, I think this should address the safety concerns. Wi-Fi calling, again, like Christy said, is very user specific. You have to have Wi-Fi calling on your home carrier. You have to accept the terms. You have to put in a 911 address in case you call 911. So anyway, so it creates a lot of issues. But I think by adding this level of cellular amplification in the building does provide that level of safety.
Okay.
Again, you know, if there are people or groups using the building after hours, there might not be, you know, readily accessible phones for them to use. So, you know, especially with after hours activities, for folks to be able to use their cell phones is very important. We do have a number of other buildings that we really should consider evaluating, because there are a number of areas sporadically throughout, you know, for instance, the senior high, Rifton, where there's no cellular signal as well because of, you know, just because of the building. So I think this is a good start towards finding a product that works and then using it to maintain the same level of safety and security in all of our buildings.
Okay, great, thanks.
I would agree with that. In any type of emergency situation, the first thing people are going to go for is their cell phone, call for help, and you know that's not an, you know, right now that's not an option for us. And even in the classroom, if we would be in a lockdown situation, the position of the phones and where the teacher might be with students, they might not be able to get to that phone to make a call out, and sometimes getting information to the police to let them know the location of where things are happening is, you know, definitely would save lives, and it's obviously not something that we can do at the time based on the cell phone situation.
Okay, good.
I think it's also important that I wanted to get you an update as well. Working with Rob Prezui and the folks at Simplex, we did end up having a number of field engineers come out and address, you know, what we feel was they're working to address the concerns with the public address system that was in the building. There were some deficiencies. There was a blown amplifier in the main cabinet, and it was just causing some really low levels. And it was also very difficult for Christy to communicate with her building. So she was kind of suffering from a double whammy in her first year there, where she couldn't effectively broadcast out a single loud message over the PA system. and folks didn't have cell phones. So we've worked with Simplex. I think we're at a point, again, it's very difficult to know exactly where you are until the building has 600 absorbing bodies in the building. But I think we've worked to get that addressed to the best of our abilities, and we'll see. But I still think on top of this, we really need to make sure for that public safety that we have this.
Okay. I guess my overall question is what kind of measurements will we take and will the contractor take to know if this is a success? I mean, obviously if people can make phone calls, that's going to be an obvious signal, but do we have any measurements, any criteria established that say, yes, it works now, or no, we may have to add more of these Dixie cups?
We've done a number of walkthroughs. I mean, literally, when you walk through the doors and the doors shut behind you, the decibel loss is immediate. You lose signal as soon as you go into the building. So being able to get up to a point, and Jason Merritt, who's with KIT, spent a number of days getting training, working with Wilson to figure out how to maximize the number of antennas. And again, the purpose of the antennas is to get the signal distributed. Classrooms, common areas. So, if there's additional that we'll need, we'll have to, again, it'll be one of those things that is a totally different organism when you have 600 bodies in a building as to where
Right.
signal's going. And so, what Wilson, shared with him was that this would be a solution that would address our needs. We have decibel readings from, like I said, there's no decibels in the building. There's nothing. So when you go on the other side of the glass, basically it just drops to nothing. So, we're going to have, now, we're talking about major carriers. It might not be every carrier. There might be some carrier that has a 3G, they're keeping some old, but I think anything 4G and LTE and even moving to 5G will be supported by this solution.
All right.
So I don't know if that's necessarily the answer. Like, do we have assurances that everything is going to work? Again, it's a passive amplifier. We're not allowed to be the middlemen. We're not allowed to really look at, we're just taking and redistributing.
Got it. Okay. Are there other questions for Joe or Christy or anyone else? Questions or concerns? Dave, I'm still familiarizing myself with the protocol. Do we simply accept this proposal at the committee level and request that it go on the agenda for Tuesday so that the entire board can review it?
Yeah, I think so. As long as there aren't any concerns or questions. We've covered this topic a few times now, and it seems like we're prepared. There's been excellent explanations and lots of information about it. So I think you point out some of the reasons why it's necessary. And, I think the next step would really put it on the workshop meeting, like you said.
Okay, great. Joe, Joe Way, I would ask you if you could be prepared to kind of give the same preview that you gave here today when we convene on Tuesday. And Christy, I know you'll be there and you can restate the problem for members of the public who couldn't join us today. But that's what I would say, that we're ready to move this to the agenda on Tuesday. And thanks to Joe and thanks to Christy for your explanations. So I think now we can move on to the addendum to the AEM contract. AEM, of course, is the contractor for the proposed transportation center at Owatton. And when I read the original contract, and by the way, I'm not a contract person, I'm not an attorney, but it seemed to be in order from my perspective. But it was interesting to read that contract was dated 2014. So it's a 6-year-old contract, and the contractor updated that on several points, and we distributed that. So I would open that up to discussion. I don't have any specific questions at this point. It seems in order. I guess the only question I do have, Dave, is a contract of this size, would that automatically, would we let the solicitor review that, or is that something that the board does on its own?
This is Anne. Typically, these AIA contracts with architects, the solicitor does review them. So this one would have been reviewed already back, the original one back in 2014.
Right.
Really, the changes that they are making are really related to dates, and also, you know, redefining building size as up to 3 building options. The other thing is they're increasing professional liability, which is probably a standard now, from 1 million to 2 million that the architect would maintain. And a section about after 36 months, work's not completed through no fault of the architect, services will be billed at the additional service rates, the hourly rates. And of course, they have increased their hourly rates. But the biggest difference between the other contract we had, that was fixed fee. That was around 181,800, exactly 181,800. This is based on 6% of the construction cost. The 6% will be the construction cost at bid date. Obviously, they have to come up with, well, both of us, the architect and the district, a construction cost estimate. So the board will have an idea, you know, what it really is going to cost, the whole project.
Right. Okay.
So for example, if the construction costs were 3.5 million, 6% of that is 210,000. They are giving us a credit of 31,815 for the legwork that they've already done. So based upon that scenario, if it were 3.5 million, 210 minus the 31,000 credit. So they are giving us a credit, but this is 6%. So until we know what the construction cost is, you know, I can't say this is going to be we won't know what the exact fee is.
Right. Okay.
So,
Thanks.
and if
That's helpful.
okay. But
Anything
the
else?
civil engineer, does everyone understand the civil engineer will be billed for the legwork for the variance between 5,500 and 7,700. If we move ahead after the variance with the project, their land development costs is 64,350. So that's billed outside of AEM's contract.
Okay. And at this point, is that the only fee that's outside AEM's contract?
I'm sorry, part of it, I didn't hear part of it.
Is the 64,000 for the engineering, is that the only fee that's billed outside of the contract at this point, as far as we know?
Well, that's the only number we have. I mean, there will be legal that we'll have to pay, bid advertising. We'll probably have to do test borings, township review fees, a building permit. There may be a fee through the conservation district. So there will be other ones.
Okay, okay. Good. I'm trying to not just educate myself, but educate whoever's on the call or listening in from the public. I don't have any other questions, but the purpose of this meeting was to field questions and get them on the table. So are there board members or others on the call who have questions at this point?
John,
Just want to, go ahead.
I'm sorry, can you just clarify what we're talking about, what we're trying to do right here? You're just looking at the contract that was created prior for building a bus facility? Is that where we're at?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And what I would like to do after today is move this to the agenda, to the meeting for Tuesday, the workshop meeting, to let the entire board look at the original look again at the original contract, look at the addendum, and hopefully get approval so that we can proceed with the project.
So I didn't get the addendum, so I'm not quite sure what that is. If you can send that to me, that would be great.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I sent them, that's part of this Gmail business. I'm sorry. And I
That's okay.
forwarded it twice and I guess you didn't get it. So I will get that to you.
And the question I guess I have is, I'm looking at the addendum item 1.1. Are we requesting from AEM that they put together 3 building plans? How do we, once this is approved, how are they going to proceed in terms of the plan development?
Well, when we met with AEM, that's a good question. I mean, the first step really is trying to define the scope, and I think what they're really trying to capture there is, well, you know what? Phil Leinbach is available if you want me to call him and, have him zoom in quickly. Do you think you'll have other questions for him?
I mean, that was the biggest question I had is, when the conversation was, when the conversation was held, what were we asking for? What can we anticipate? What will we see? Will we see 3 separate building plans that we'll be able to evaluate, in terms of cost and also, make a decision on the one that we think is best suited for our project, or will there just be? I mean, it says up to 3. I mean, would we sit down and kind of lay out some specifications and start with 1?
But I can ask for further clarification on that, or I can just give him a call right now.
Well, it's up to John. I'd be okay with a phone call.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and maybe we could move on to another item, unless he's by the phone and can come right on. Shall we take a pause for 2 or 3 minutes while you call him, Ann?
I can call him right now. Probably get him.
Yep. Well, let's do that, and we'll just take 5, and if he's available and can join us immediately, then we'll just pick up where we left off.
Call has been forwarded to it. When you have finished recording, you may hang up or press 1 for more options.
I left him a message, so we want to move on to talk about building projects or whatever you want to move on to, and then
Sure.
I'll let you know when he calls.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Ann. Rob, it's become a part of these meetings for you to update us on projects that are underway, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to do that for us today. So the floor is yours.
Sure, thank you. First, we'll talk about the junior high chiller replacement project. That project's approximately 99% completed. They're finishing up on some installation work this week, and the startup that chiller will be next Tuesday, I believe the 16th. So that will that chiller will be started up, and any kind of punch list items that happen from that will obviously be addressed. So the hope is that the installation work will be done by then, so we can turn the chiller on and leave it on. If the installation work's not done at that time, we will have, it would be wise to not run the chiller without all the pipes properly insulated, or else we're going to have condensation on some of the stuff that wasn't insulated. But to hope the plan is to have all that stuff done before Tuesday, and then that'll be fired up and ready to go, and basically pretty much done.
Great.
So any questions about that one?
No, well, congratulations. That was probably the big project of the summer, right?
Yeah, well, it was a big project of the spring, actually, and
right,
late winter. It was a little bit delayed due to COVID. For example, the chiller we were supposed to receive in the beginning of April, and we did not receive the chiller till I believe the beginning of May or even mid-May. But that was due to a lot of the manufacturing stuff being in China. So that kind of delayed that. That's why it's June, and that buildings doesn't have the chiller operating yet. If all that stuff hadn't happened, this project would have been done already. But yeah, we're wrapping up that project. The other major project, HVAC upgrades, Lorraine and Jackson Wall. They're ahead of schedule because they were able to access the building sooner than we had all anticipated when the project was begun. The most of the rough-in work is completed, meaning that they're almost at the point where they will start receiving the univents and installing them. So I got a schedule of that. We should start receiving the first of the univents in the first week of July, and receive them sporadically throughout the first week of August. So I think the last scheduled shipment of univents was August 7th. So that's 2 weeks to put those in. I don't foresee any delays or problems with that. So
okay. And what's the anticipated completion of the Jackson Wall project?
I believe it was August 20th, but I'm not 100% sure. I'll have to check my notes on that.
Okay, that's all right.
At least substantial completion. I mean, there'll be punch list items and things, but the system will be running and doing what it's supposed to do by that date. Got it. Okay. The track replacement is also a project that's right on schedule. They're completing the final paving that's necessary as part of that work. After that, there's a 30-day cure period for that pavement before they can put the track surface on top of it. So we're looking at that starting up, the beginning or mid-July, them getting to that phase of being able to start putting the wear course or the track surface on that. But there's been no issues or delays. The weather's been pretty cooperative for that project as well.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I see Ann is on the phone, so maybe she's talking with Phil.
Can I ask you a quick question for Rob?
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
sure.
Go ahead.
Regarding the track, is there a kind of a roundabout date as to when it can start being used?
Yeah, again, I'd have to look at the construction schedule there. I believe it was the second or third week of August. Obviously, the more time the track surface, because it's just an adhesive on the pavement surfaces, and then like the rubber running material that's put on top of it. So the longer you let that stay unmolested, the better off you are. So especially if weather conditions, if they, if we have a wet August or whatever, That may fluctuate the week back and forth, but I believe the goal was the second or third week of August for that to be ready.
I want to get back to that later. I see Anne's ready, so I'll let her go.
Thanks, Rob.
Okay, I have Phil on the line, and I've asked him to elaborate a little on 1.1. Are you there, Phil?
Yes, I am.
Can you hear him?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm just thinking back, we had a call in I guess about a month and a half ago with the administrative team.
Now he seems to be fading.
About looking at what our options were. So I put in there kind of the three options. He had mentioned looking at, the small, medium, large approach. And I think in that call, we also recognized the reality is the current design where it was left off is probably benchmark and some adjustment off of that as kind of the option B, which would be for cost savings. So simply, there's going to be variations to look at to say what administration needs are, transportation needs are, facilities needs are, to find cost savings potentially, at least in the first phase, even if the ultimate build out is something similar to where the design was left the last time.
Did everyone hear that?
Yeah, it kind of faded in and out, but I got. But Dave, did you?
No, I didn't really. I mean, could you summarize that, Ann? Because that audio didn't come through for me very well at all.
Phil, you still there?
Yes, yes. I'll try to say it slower. I don't know if it's me going through the speakerphone on the iPhone through the Zoom. Basically, we're looking at coming up with some options for cost savings. We had talked in the call with administration about kind of I think the term was used, the Goldilocks, three bears, trying to find and just right, maybe larger option and smaller option. And then making assessment before we go to zoning with what is the right approach for the district. And that may mean a phase one and a phase two because initial cost needs to be controlled, but the ultimate build out of what's approved for zoning might be something different, just so that we have our options open and we come in eyes wide open with regard to cost.
So basically what you're saying is, 3 building size options during the process of defining the scope, identifying, the last design was 13,875 square feet. That was pretty much the big bear. And then we're really going to look at lesser scope, something that may not be as much as that, correct?
Correct. Try to find ways, perhaps, obviously, sacrificing the necessities of what that has to provide.
But ultimately, when we're ready to go for the variance, it obviously will be one design.
Right.
One design.
Right, but we make it
Right, but going into for the variance, it will be the full scope of the project, but it could be phased.
That's our understanding. We're not going to take that hard and fast. I don't want to do 15 options.
Okay. So does everyone understand why that language is in there? It's basically saying we're looking at 3 different options, but ultimately deciding on one, which would be going.
Yeah, before we go to the township.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I remember this discussion, and I remember saying that even if we decide upon a smaller option, that we still want to make sure that we're giving Rick and Ben and his folks what they need, and that's an appropriately sized and outfitted transportation center that is markedly different from the one that we have now. So I think if we can strike that balance, that would be the ideal. And when we talked about the options at an earlier meeting, I think I was just trying to inject a sense of flexibility so that if the board wanted to go one way, that the project was ready to, could be adjusted. But again, we still want to make sure that we're giving Rick and Ben a good center, a good transportation center.
I have one more question about the sketch, these plans. Are they going to be fully developed plans, let's say all three? Or, I mean, are we looking at maybe just some sketch plans to be able to kind of look at it more conceptually and not expect that 3 fully developed comprehensive plans would be, expected?
They will not be construction plans going to be full in nature, but developed enough that we can answer the questions. We have a design that is compliant with zoning, subdivision, land development ordinance as far as the site development before we go to the zoning hearing board, so that we can satisfy their questions. Assuming then we get a positive response, then we will develop that design into fully developed documents that are ready for public bidding.
Okay.
Great, thank you, Phil. Any other questions for Phil while we have him? All right, Phil, before we let Phil go, what's the sense? I'm thinking it might be advantageous to have Phil available at the meeting on Tuesday. So first of all, Phil, is that okay with you? And to Dave and Ann, is that something?
That's fine. That's my only open day next week. You're in luck.
Okay, wonderful. All right, good. And we'll look forward to just so you're there to answer any specific questions as you were today. I think that would be very helpful. Thanks, Phil.
Not a problem. Thank you all.
All right. See you Tuesday. All right, so we will move ahead. We will put this on the agenda. If there are no other questions, we'll put on the agenda for Tuesday. The rest of the board will have an opportunity to ask questions. Phil will be there. And any final points or questions on this matter? All right, hearing none. The only other item I had for today, and Rob, at the risk of putting you on the spot, I know we just heard from the governor, or rather the Department of Education, about reopening plans. Have you given any thought to what that's going to mean for your group in terms of cleaning, rearranging classrooms, redesigning buildings, painting arrows on the floor? I mean, all of that. I don't expect you to have fully drawn plans, but I'm just interested where you are now in your pre-planning, if you will.
Well, it's something that we talk about every day. I am in contact with a group. I belong to the Berks County facilities directors. All have a bi-weekly meeting, and things like this are discussed and challenges. We're not really seeing any concrete plans coming out for how a reopening is going to look like. So right now we were just doing the best we can, marshaling what materials we can, making sure that we have the materials to do disinfecting and the equipment, and upgrading some areas of equipment in order to do larger scale disinfecting and things of that nature. As far as classroom layouts and things of that nature, we're still not sure how that's going to work. I mean, I have my own personal feelings about that, where if I have a classroom with 25 desks and you tell me that they've got to be 6 feet apart, now you're fitting 15 desks in there, and where do the other 10 kids go? and where the other 10 kids go from every other classroom that you're doing that to. So, I think there's got to be a lot of discussions and a lot of decisions made before the kids come back on how that's going to look like. And I'm not hearing from any of my sources that anyone's got concrete ideas on how that's going to happen just yet. So as it stands right now, we're just making sure that we've got, the personal protective equipment for our employees, that we have the chemicals and the equipment necessary to do the disinfecting once these buildings are occupied on a regular basis or semi-regular basis. So that's pretty much all we can do for now until we get some other direction on what it's going to look like when the kids do return to these buildings.
Okay. I'm glad to hear that you're meeting with your counterparts at the other districts. Any notion of when we might hear some more concrete plans? No. Okay.
I would like to add that Dr. Miner is developing a task force which will include 15 to 20 employees, administrators, obviously Rob, Eric, Rick, and principals. So we will be hitting the ground running when she does come on board in order to address all facets of returning and what it's going to look like.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Ann, for that. Are there any questions about that, even though we don't have answers yet, but are there questions or concerns from members of the board or others on the call? All right. Well, hearing none, that's what I wanted to cover today. If there are any new business items that people think this committee ought to be looking at this point?
I have one.
Okay.
Recently, my HVAC technician was working with a contractor in the mechanical room of the senior high school on the hot water heater system, and through their workings with that, they discovered an issue with the breaching for the boiler in the hot water system, the exhaust system or the ductwork. Apparently, when that was replaced in the last renovation, I'm not quite sure the year off the top of my head, but instead of using galvanized steel, they just used regular sheet metal. And at this point now, that sheet metal is completely deteriorated to the point where you can put your finger through it, which is obviously not good for a combustion system exhaust in that school. So I have contacted Systems Design Engineering to get a proposal for putting together specifications of repair of that nature. While I can't quote you an exact price off the top of my head, is definitely going to be a project that we're going to need to bid. So that's something I'm working on right now, and I just wanted to get that out there because that's something that the board may see in the next coming week or two as far as the voting or the work session and the voting meeting. So,
right. Thanks, Rob. At this point, is this system shut down?
Well, it's shut down now because it's summertime. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So if we decide to, if your recommendation is to get it fixed, and that's what I'm hearing, and we decide to fix it, any thoughts given to timing of the repairs and when it could be operational?
The hope would be to have it operational by the heating season.
Got it. Okay. Well, thank you for the heads up. Any questions or comments for Rob on this matter? I know you said you didn't have an exact date on when this sheet metal was put in. I would assume we would oversee this to the point where the right materials are used this time.
Yes.
Yeah, good. Okay. And this is at the junior high, you say?
Senior high.
Senior, got it. Okay. Dave or Ann, anything else that we should be considering at this point?
No, nothing off the top of my head, no.
Yeah, okay. Great. Well, thank you all for showing. Oh,
Dr. Herring, Scott.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I wanted to bring up a quick question. Earlier in the year, some board members went to Owatin to get a tour of the back of the facility where the pond is. And I had a quick question about the issue there with the aerator. Has anything come about with that? I know that we had, I believe it's an aerator, I'm saying the right term, that was, I believe, purchased through a grant or picked up through a grant, but it has not been installed. Do you know anything about that, Rob, or if it's in limbo? What are we
I know I was working with Dr. Holler on that. Apparently that is in a contractor's possession, that aerator. So I think we were trying to coordinate a meeting in order to get that rolling again. And I believe that was right around the time where the COVID-19 kicked in. So I don't know if Dr. Holler wants to throw in any information she might have.
Yeah, that's correct. The person who has the aerator owns Wolf Run Landscaping, and there's been emails that prior to COVID-19 that were going back and forth, so we could get that aerator back and then have it installed. And we have a couple of the teachers that are involved that are to see if there would be people that would volunteer their services, so it wouldn't be any cost to the district. So it was something that we were actively working on, but when all this hit, that kind of was at a standstill. Our ultimate goal, that Matt and I and some of the other teachers see is the outdoor classroom is a real opportunity, not just for the school, but for the district, that it could be used for a lot of different purposes. There's a huge recycling station that was put together by an Eagle Scout that was never utilized, and we'd like to see all that be brought and used to teach kids about the importance of the environment, and that's our ultimate goal with that project. So hopefully we can get, once we're back in, we can get that up and running.
Great. So
Okay.
it's still going to be a focus, it's still going to be worked on and move forward with it. Great.
Yeah, I have been in contact with the woman who's in charge of the watershed and master gardening through Penn State. And in my mind, what I'd like to see happen is I'd like to see that be a cooperation between the district and Penn State, that perhaps we could even have people from Penn State, who this is their area of expertise, come and teach kids classes about that. And then any of our students who perhaps are at the high school level in various clubs, have that be a site that they can use. So again, I see this as like a really cool opportunity, not just for Watton Creek, Dakota, but the school districts. And with the whole COVID-19 situation, we decided that we weren't going to do out of district field trips next year, just because of the uncertainty of would there be a spike and then we have to return money. And so this might be a way to kind of fill some of that, like we can bring kids to our own site and do some really cool things with them. So just some ideas that have been tossed around.
Is there still a question regarding the maintenance of that facility and the upkeep of that?
I think that once we have it cleaned up to the point where we could utilize it as a true outdoor classroom, that's something that's going to have to be looked at, and something that Rob already was aware of, with the trails and things of that nature. I know ticks are a real problem down there, so I'm not sure, what could be done about that, but it's definitely something that was a discussion point.
Okay. So if I can ask a question, not as a board member, but as a mom, my son is working to create an Eagle project. And after seeing what that facility had looked like, I guess the steps are kind of eroded and some of the area needs to be cleaned up. The benches need to be cleaned up as well. How does he move forward in asking the school district for that to be his project? How does he get approval for that? Anyone here know?
So in the past, I believe it just went through the principal, and then the principal would just, make sure that it was okay with the superintendent. A lot of times I also run things through Ann because of liability, like what that looks like, right, depending on what the project is. So if he wants to forward that to me, and then, I will collect it and depending on when it is, whether that goes through Dr. Phillips or Dr. Minor, we can certainly do that.
Great. Thanks for answering that. I appreciate it.
Oh, no problem.
That's it.
As far as the ticks are concerned, I think if we buy a family of possums, that'll take care of the tick problem.
Well, if you watch the trail cam, there are some big animals down there. So there really are.
Okay. Before we adjourn, Joe, did any questions come in since we began?
No questions.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. I think we're adjourned. Thank you all for attending. Thanks for the input, and stay safe, everyone.